Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History, Spiritual Studies. We're looking at the book of John and the impersonal life, and we just finished chapters 4, and we're about to start chapters 5 in both books. But both books are a little bit dense, and they're a little bit difficult to understand. And they're hard to get through. So we're going to enter this one the same way that Elvis would enter a dojo, through the crucible of a warrior.
Born in the fire, Evansville flame, hammer in hand, carved out his name. 16 and airborne boots in the dirt, jumping through walls, unbaptized and hurt. Karate in Japan, fists like steel, champion of honor, deadly and real. Sensei, a warrior's no room for doubt. You wear the G or you train and come back. Your eyes a crucible, baby, not a showbiz belt. You bleed, you break, you feel a warrior's spell. Elvis hit the mat, but he rolls with a roll. Sneer in his soul, ready for war. It's burning, burning, burning through the pain. Crucible of a warrior, forging Hank's domain. 30 throws, not dances, a fight. Bones to set, boards shattered on sight. Shoot-o elbow, fingertip flame. Every strike a prayer, every cater name. 6 weeks of fire, no cameras, no fame. Just sweat and bruises, no one played tame. Saw came in, fist like a storming set. Put him down, break ribs if it's known. It's a crucible, baby, not a velvet crown. You fall, you claw, but you don't stay down. Elvis hit the mat, but he rose with the raw. Sneer in his soul, ready for war. It's burning, burning, burning through the pain. Crucible of a warrior, forged in Hank's domain. All eyes watched the king that day. Would he crumble or would he stay? But Hank saw it, war in his eyes. Not a quitter, but a fighter who rise. From Hollywood lights to dojo dust, Elvis earned it not on fame but trust. No stunt, no script, just grit and bruise. Black belt truth, not a headline rule. It's a crucible, baby, not a stage or set. You earn every inch, every beat of sweat. Elvis hit the mat, but he rolls with a roar. Sneer in his soul, ready for war. It's burning, burning, burning through the pain. Crucible of a warrior. They burned through the fire, broke through the fear. The dojo legends and kings stood clear. Crucible of a warrior. Elvis was here.
Thank you all for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And I remember that today is Terry's birthday. Happy birthday, Terry, from Elvis History, who joins us here quite often for the chats and watches virtually everything that I put out. Thank you so much, Terry. Terry is having a birthday party today that we can all join. It's at 8 p.m. East or 8 p.m. London time. That's the same time that I normally broadcast, so I am canceling today's 3 p.m. show so that we can all gather at Terry's channel, Elvis History, for his birthday, for his live stream. And I think he said some of his family is going to be there too, so that'll be fun to see. So that will be at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time today, or whatever time you normally watch me after this broadcast. But be sure to go over to Terry's channel, Elvis History. And then we will pick up the following day on the story that we left with Marty, who's about to tell us some sad things about the Circle G, so I don't mind pushing it off for a day. Happy birthday, Terry. Thanks for being here. And today, we're going to get started with a few quotes that I have for you from some people who were around during this period when Elvis first received the impersonal life. And these people, they saw Elvis as he read the book, and he moved on to other books because, of course, this book, it sparked something, and he had to read more and more of these books. And one person who has something to say about it is the man who gave him the book, and that's Larry Geller. And Larry says, for Elvis, reading wasn't a passive activity. Each book promised a new adventure, a new way of viewing things. I think this is a really neat quote because it tells us things that we already know about Elvis. That reading wasn't a passive activity. We found that to be true for ourselves because we've looked at things he's written within the Impersonal Life and the King James Bible. And we're going to look at a lot more things he's written as time goes forward. And we look at different books. And we're going to see pieces of each book quoted into other books. Just as we've seen a verse of the Psalms that itself is quoted by the text of the Impersonal Life, that Elvis then writes into other books. Be still and know I am God. He writes that quote over and over and over. And that for Elvis, each book promised a new adventure. And this is the most important part, I think. A new way of viewing things. So people ask, what was Elvis looking for on this quest? What was he searching for? We've all seen the documentaries where he's called the Searcher. People have their different theories about what he was looking for. But Larry's really telling us right here, and I don't think even Larry understands what he said. A new way of viewing things. Elvis was searching for perspective. Elvis was searching for perspectives outside of his own so that he could have a fuller view of whatever subject it was he was studying. It's somewhat like Picasso, who was a Cubist painter. And the idea behind Cubism is that you paint all sides of the subject at one time. And that's why when you look at a Cubist painting, it doesn't make any sense to look at it. Because you're absorbing all sides of the subject at the same time. All the things you could see of whatever the object or person it is that Picasso has painted. But as creatures in this mortal plane, we see things only in one perspective. Straight ahead, basically. Whatever is in front of our face, that's what we see. And so the thing that is turned away from us, the side that is away, we don't see that. Picasso tries to show it all to us at once. Elvis is trying to see everything at once. He's trying to see things the way that other people see them. And why is he trying to see things the way other people see them? because that's how you communicate with other people. You understand what they see, and then you talk directly to that. Just as he did with his co-star that we saw earlier, Diane McBain, in a previous episode, and she wasn't really interested in religion, but she was interested in talking about spiritual things. And that's the avenue that Elvis used to show her what he was thinking. And of course, what he's thinking isn't just about spiritual things, it incorporates religion. So he got to sneak in his religious ideas, and Diane heard them and didn't even realize that they were directly about Christianity. She remained in this area where she was about the spirituality, which the impersonal life is telling us may be part of the path for people to finally get to the Christianity. That the word comes through many different places. And then Priscilla Presley, because she was there too. She was about 19 years old when Larry first shows up in 1964 and gives Elvis this book and begins the quest. And Priscilla says, Larry was a total threat to us all. He would spend hours and hours and hours with Elvis, just talking to him. And he wasn't anything that Elvis represented. Larry didn't represent anything that Elvis had believed in prior to that time. Now, we haven't finished either the Book of John or the Impersonal Life, but I think just in the passages that we've read, we see deep resonance with things that Elvis believed in far prior to when Larry gave him this book. That the book is reflecting ideas Elvis grew up with in the scripture. And that Elvis is seeing his own generosity and his kindness and his empathy. It's reflected in the book. And it brings him possibly a God that is more generous, who gives grace more often than even that which he sees in the New Testament. And certainly more than in the Old Testament. And I think that speaks to Elvis. But to Priscilla, the things that are in this book are completely foreign to Elvis. They are not the way that she sees Elvis. And that makes you wonder, what spiritual side of Elvis did Priscilla see? And then Larry Geller says, it was never enough for Elvis to simply read a book. He had to absorb it, think about it, question it, link its thoughts and ideas with all he had read before and things he had heard people say. So Elvis, as we have already seen, and we've already come to the conclusion ourselves, and Larry is telling us it's true, that Elvis wrestled with the texts that he read. He didn't just read them, he lived in them. He made them part of himself. He thought about them. He did not accept blindly what they said. He questioned it. And then he only accepted it once he had linked it to other thoughts and ideas that he had. He fitted into a system of belief that he was building throughout this 3 years, reinforcing beliefs that he had always had that came from the scripture. And Larry says that Elvis dog-eared pages, highlighted pages, and jotted notes and questions on the end papers and throughout the margins. And we know this to be true. We know that Elvis did this. But it's not clear to me that Larry understands that Elvis was not just doing this for himself, that he did it in the initial run when he read the book for himself. But then he would get copies of these books, and The Impersonal Life is not the only book he bought and gifted to other people. He would write these notes, more like final drafts of the notes. It's like when he read it himself, he was talking to himself in the book. And then in the copies, well, he wrote the notes that continued to resonate with him, the ones that he saw truth in, that fit the passages in the books they were near. He wrote the parts that he wanted the people to know the most because he knew they weren't going to read the book. Because most people aren't going to read one of these books. You have to have a special kind of interest in it. And those of us here today, now there's only 4 of us. 5. There's 4 of you and 1 of me. Those of us that are here today, we have an intense interest in Elvis, but not necessarily in these mystical texts that he read, in these spiritual books. We would like to have kind of a distilled version of everything that he saw in the book, but nobody has that. That's why we're walking through the book, to experience it with Elvis. But if we did not have this interest in Elvis, I don't know that any of us would read through this book on our own. It's a difficult text. And if Elvis just handed it to you, I'm not sure you'd make it through more than the first chapter. But I think we'd all read what he wrote. So he was communicating these ideas and giving you an opportunity to go further if you wish to do so. And Gunn asked, what year did Elvis and Larry meet and start reading these other books? It's 1964. And they met in 1964. And as I've stated in a previous video, I don't think it was by accident. Larry worked for J. Sebring. J. Sebring would travel to Elvis and cut his hair. He was a hairstylist, and Larry worked for him. And with this interest that Elvis had in spiritual things, I believe he was trying to initiate conversations about it with people. And I have no doubt that Larry bored Jay to tears at certain points with his discussions about spiritual things. And therefore, Jay would have said, Elvis, I have just the guy you need to talk to. And apparently Larry had been on his own quest for about 4 years. He started up around 1960. And so he was basically guiding Elvis through the path he himself had walked from 1960 to 1964. And Larry himself is ecstatic to find someone else who wants to talk about it because he has just as much trouble interesting people in it as Elvis does. Probably more so because more people are willing to, at least listen when Elvis talks because they just want to be near Elvis. And Gunn says 1964, then Priscilla must have known about his interest when she married him. Well, of course. Oh, yes. And in fact, we've got another quote from Priscilla Presley. Let's hear what she says. Priscilla says, Larry would bring Elvis books, piles of books. And Elvis would lay in bed at night and read them to me. That was the thing when you dealt with Elvis. If he had a passion for something, you had to go into it with him and show the same love he had for it. Or at least you had to pretend to. So that's directly from Priscilla herself. Age 19 to 22, as Elvis was on this quest. And he attempted to interest her in it as he attempted to interest everyone around him. And he even read to her in bed. And she didn't like it. And she didn't like the fact that Elvis had, or that Larry was bringing Elvis all of these books. So she also says that she was pretending to be interested, and that she didn't really have an interest. So I find that a very interesting statement on her part. But now let's move on and begin to look at the books that we're here to understand. And we're going to re-enter the book of John. But first, we're going to refresh ourselves about what was in it. And here we can see Jesus and his followers going from Judea to Galilee as they pass through Samaria. And so as Jesus is walking through this area, I think he's left Jerusalem, you can see that it's not just his disciples that follow him. He has many people who are following him. And they come to the city of Sychar. Now these pictures that we're looking at, they come from a comic book that was produced in 1941, published in 1941. Elvis was a child in 1941. He would have been 6 years old, just at the point where he would have been truly learning to read. And so this particular comic would have probably, like, I can't say for sure, but it would probably have been available to him at some point when he was 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 years old, somewhere in that area, because I feel that this is the kind of comic book that a church would have purchased for a Sunday school class, perhaps, or that parents would have bought their own children because they would have thought the messages in this comic book would be better than a superhero comic book. And so they might have been more willing to purchase this particular book as a gift for their children. I think most comic books that are being purchased at this time are the kids themselves, as they earn dimes and nickels from returning empty bottles and things like that, which is one of the things Elvis did in order to earn dimes and nickels. But I don't think kids would have bought this comic on their own, but they would have read it if it had been in their hands. So a place like a church or a school may have purchased something like this. And Gunn says that Elvis must have known or felt that Priscilla was pretending. I'm sure he did. I'm sure he knew when they were all pretending. That's why he needed Larry. Well, I think Larry was the only one who wasn't pretending. out of the group. Now, he did meet others, like Diane McBain, and they were truly interested in what he had to say, but those closest to him, they were not. And I think we heard, it was either Jesus or John that said that in an earlier chapter, that the teacher's not known in his own land, or is not accepted among his own people. Might have been in the Impersonal Life. It's something that we read very recently. And Gunn says that should have been a reason not to marry her. Well, I don't know. She's not interested in his spiritual quest, and he would have liked someone to be, but I don't know if that was a deal breaker for him. Apparently it wasn't. I think we have to accept that he truly loved Priscilla. And love doesn't play by any rules, and it doesn't rationalize, and it doesn't care if your loved one isn't interested in what you are. It's its own separate thing. And perhaps it wasn't love. Maybe it's something that's very close to love. I think love is a very, very complex emotion, or that we complicate it by adding other emotions to it that truly we should define as their own emotions, like infatuation. But I'm not sure he was infatuated with Priscilla because it lasted so long. I think for most of us, infatuation is something that's temporary, but Elvis was a mythical figure. And so his emotions I think they tended to last, or they were profound beyond ours in certain ways, as with other mythical figures that we see throughout history. And Pat says that I think Elvis gave it all, but it takes two to love. Right. That's right. And so I think part of the question then becomes, did Priscilla love Elvis? And so did she pretend through love, or did she pretend through her personal desire not to create an issue or to maintain his interest or whatever that personal interest was? And that's something that, I don't know, it's not going to be in a book, right? So we just have to look at what she says and decide it for ourselves. So I guess we'd have to ask if we've ever pretended interest in something for a loved one. But it irritated her. It got to irritating her. And Gunn says she thinks that she has heard Elvis say many times he's looking for a girl with the same values in life. That's true. He did say that. But I think we've all known a lot of people that fell in love with people who did not reflect any of the values in their life. And that in some cases, those particular relationships are the most intense that we see. And I can think of a lot of them, even in historical terms. So again, I'm not sure. These are things that these people wrestled with. And ultimately, Elvis did determine to marry her. Although, I'm not denying there may have been a lot of pressure, and that there were a lot of reasons he probably shouldn't have, and that the signs were all there. And Pat says that in her opinion, she doesn't think Priscilla did love him. I think that when you describe someone as that was the thing when you dealt with Elvis, if he had a passion for something, you had to go into it with him. That sounds like you're being dragged along into stuff that you don't want to do, and that you're not happy to be with this person. And I kind of feel like when you love somebody, even when you're not interested in their interest, you feel a passion for their interest because they do. And so that you can't maybe go 100% with them. I think all husbands and wives have their own interests and outside, personal interests, but that you can share their joy in it, and that it doesn't irritate you that they're having that joy, or that you can't fully enjoy it 100% like they do, but you can still really get into it. Like if your husband or spouse really loves Star Trek and you can't stand it, but he drags you to 3 or 4 conventions, I mean, that doesn't mean you can't have fun with all these people who just happen to have a hobby that you don't, that you're not as into. Or he takes you to the football games. And Gunn says, doesn't it include religion? So that would have always been a problem for them because Priscilla was Catholic. So they were Christian, but I think that right there prevented them from worshiping together. And so I don't know that they ever worshiped together. And that would be interesting to find if we could find that somewhere that they did. I mean, I know that Priscilla once went to church with Donna Presley. She tells a story about it. And I know, therefore, Priscilla went to church and she worshiped at some point in her life. But I don't know that she ever did with Elvis. I mean, obviously, they never went to a church together, but Elvis did watch a lot of church services on Sunday on his television. And Pat says that in her opinion, Priscilla wanted the fame and that she wanted the spotlight. I don't know if she wanted that at the moment they got married. I do believe that once the spotlight was on her and the fame began to grow, that she greatly enjoyed it. And then she leaned into it. That's definitely true. But at the moment that they got married, I think her dreams were very small. I think they were probably selfish, but they were very, very small in comparison to what she actually ended up doing. And Terry says, I think Elvis loved Priscilla, but in the end, he was not in love with her. I think that's the question, Terry. Was he ever in love with her? I think he loved everybody around him. As we know, he told Ed Parker, even after Red West had betrayed him and it had all gone down and the book was out, or coming out, he told Ed Parker, I still love Red. So I think he loves everybody around him. But was he ever in love with Priscilla? He obviously had some extremely deep emotions for her at some point. And Pat says, in my opinion, I think even Elvis knew down the road that Priscilla didn't love him. Elvis was a very perceptive person. So I find it hard to believe that he didn't know that Priscilla did not love him at the moment that they got married. And maybe she did at that moment, and that's maybe why he went forward with it. But he was a very perceptive person, so this indicates a huge blind spot in his life, which tells me he didn't want to see whatever was here. He was searching in these books in a very detailed manner, but in his own relationship with Priscilla, kind of feels like it was on autopilot. Nobody was in the cockpit. But again, that's my opinion. And so I do appreciate all of you sharing your opinions with me in the chat and in the comments. And while you're at it, make sure you hit a like button. Because I'm only going to be able to get one like today because we're going to Terry's birthday party at 3 p.m. So make sure that everybody that normally comes to my broadcast, 3 p.m., make sure that you head over to Terry's channel Elvis history, because we're having a birthday party over there. And that's where we're going to be today. And Pat says that Elvis said he loved every woman he was with. And Gunn says that Priscilla was not his soulmate. And Gunn says Priscilla pretended a lot, which is an indication she had a plan. Well, that's an interesting observation, Gunn, because she does say the word pretend here. And we could interpret that to mean that she was hiding her true feelings as she, moved about a plan. But back to the picture on screen, which is a representation of the book of John, chapter 4. Although it does incorporate other portions of the Bible, we can see Jesus, and it says, "At Jacob's well, Jesus rests, and others go to the city to buy food." One of the most interesting things about this picture is when we first read this story, and I saw the word well, I'm thinking of, like a round circular stone well rising out of the desert and basically sand and dirt around it. And you come up to the well and you throw your bucket in and you get your water out. Or maybe it had some contraption set up there that you could do that. And maybe it had a cover over it like we would see with American wells, especially from the 18th and 19th centuries. But you could see Jesus is sitting on this stone bench that's been built into a stone wall that rises. And so the well is actually in an enclosed and protected area. Now, was it truly like this? I don't know. But the artist apparently feels that it would have been. And that makes sense because this is a holy place. And it's the source of life for the area. So there's some stuff built up around it. Because it's more than just a well. It's like the center of the life in this area. And Gunn says that Priscilla's first plan was to get married. Well, it took her a long time to get through with that one, but it sure might have been. And you've got to say that she had some endurance if it was. Because she stuck around for a long time before it happened. And here we can see a Samaritan woman comes to draw water. And as we've learned, the Samaritans are an offshoot of the Jewish people. They believe only in the first 5 books of the Old Testament, the books of Moses. They do not accept any of the rest of the Old Testament, which is the book the Jews accept as their holy Bible. And of course, the Jews don't accept the New Testament. But we're all connected together through this book. The Samaritans, the Jews, the Gentiles, they're all pulled together through the full Bible. And Gunn says that once she was married, new plans formed. I believe that is true, Gunn. I absolutely believe that is true. But again, I also believe that her plans were very small. They were the products of a mind that was not stretched to the fullness of what it could accomplish if it wanted to do these things. And that once she was separated from Elvis, other influences came into her life. And I believe that's where she became much, much worse. But I think she had the capacity, and I do think, I'm not saying that the selfishness wasn't there and the desire for self-interest. That's all there. It just wasn't on the scale that it became after she left Elvis. And Gunn saying what was best for herself, absolutely. But the thoughts of what was best for herself were small and became extremely large around 1972. And Jesus says to the woman, "Give me a drink," or "Give me to drink." And you can see a better picture of this bench that Elvis or Jesus is sitting on. And you can see the colorful robes or dress that the woman is wearing. And she's got a blue headdress, which is the same kind of headdress I think many of us associate with the Mother Mary, Jesus' mother. And you can see the walls and the stone floor that are built around this well. This is a structure. I'm imagining it's open to the air, but it's a structure. It provides some shelter because even in inclement weather, you're going to have to come to this well, get some water. Pat says that she thinks Priscilla used Elvis to get where she is today. Well, there can be no doubt of that. And in this panel, the woman is asking Jesus, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask a favor of me, a Samaritan? Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." So, as we've already noted, the Samaritans and the Jews and the Gentiles have all allowed themselves to be separated from each other because of their religious beliefs, which all stem from the same scriptures. And Gunn says that Priscilla started out as very selfish, and the more you get, the more you want. So Gunn's saying that she fed what was probably a very negative impulse. And when you feed negative impulses, they grow exponentially. That is true. And the Samaritan woman, she gives to Jesus this drink of water. But Jesus says, if you knew who asked the favor, you would ask a drink of him, for he gives water that satisfies forever. Pat says that she thinks that Elvis was in Priscilla's way for what she wanted. I don't know. I think we're going to have to take a long, deep dive in 1970 through 77 to make those determinations. But I'm not saying that's not true. I don't think she liked dealing with Elvis. I definitely don't think she liked that. I don't think she liked any of the control Elvis had over her life due to Lisa Marie, which wasn't a lot, but I don't think she liked having to comply with that at all. But in this panel, it says, I know that Messiah will come, who is called Christ. When he is come, he will tell us all things. And so this is the Samaritan woman saying that she believes the Messiah is coming, which is one of the I think, basic tenets of the Jews. That there will be a salvation that is brought about by the Christ. And Jesus says, I that speak unto thee am he. So he declares himself to be the Messiah to the Samaritan woman. And the Samaritan woman, she believes. And here the disciples returning are surprised that Jesus talked to a Samaritan woman. They don't say that he shouldn't have, but they are surprised. So they reinforce the fact that there is a distinction and a division between the Jews and the Samaritans, even though they have such similar beliefs. And Gunn says, finally, Priscilla got it all. Almost. Well, she did. Pretty much. But more importantly, she spent it all. Like 2 or 3 times. I mean, she spent it all. And Gunn says, what is a Samaritan religiously? Well, they're basically a Jew. But they only believe in the first 5 books of the Bible. The books that Moses wrote. They do not believe anything beyond those 5 books. They don't read anything beyond those 5 books. They only have those 5. Now, the Jews themselves, they read all of the Old Testament. They call it the Torah. That is their holy book. It includes the first 5 that the Samaritans believe in, but it includes a bunch of other books. What the Samaritans mostly don't believe in is prophecy. Although here, the Samaritan woman says she does believe in the Christ, which is a prophecy. But they don't like a lot of the books of prophecy, or they just don't like anything past the first 5. Now, a Christian, who we might think of as a Gentile, although you don't have to be a Christian to be a Gentile, but the Christians, they believe in the Old Testament and the New Testament, but they believe that the New Testament overpowers the Old Testament. That the Old Testament is a history of how we got to the New Testament, and the New Testament is what we should be following in our lives. So that all 3 of these groups are linked together through the same book. And yet they've all divided themselves. And one thing Jesus is doing is he's bringing everybody together. Now, at this point, the New Testament doesn't exist. It's being formed through his journeys. And so the New Testament will tell the story of reuniting people, of bringing everyone back together, of once again saying that all are sons of Adam. They all came from the same source, and that we're all creatures of God. And in the next panel, we see that the woman has returned, although they didn't get her colors exactly right, so I think it's difficult to tell it's the same Samaritan woman, but it is. And she says, come, see a man which told me all the things that ever I did. Is not this the Christ? So she's back in town, and she's telling people in the marketplace that she's seen the Messiah. And if they want to see him, they better get out there, because he's at the well right now. And they know her to be a truthful woman. So they go to see. Now, they don't know if it's the Messiah or the Christ, but they believe that the woman's seen something. Back at the well, the disciples are saying, "Master, eat." And we learned from the book of John that the disciples had gone into the city or the town, probably to go to that marketplace that we just saw. And the Bible said it was to purchase meat. Well, I have since learned that the word meat comes from a Hebrew word that could also mean food in general. So it doesn't mean meat specifically, it just means some kind of food. And so most likely they went to buy food that they could immediately eat. Somewhat like we saw in the previous picture, and as we can see on the plate with the fruit that one of the disciples is offering to Jesus. Now they may have also got actual meat, although that seems to have been more rare, than would most likely have been. And I had theorized that maybe they went to buy live meat so that they could take it with them in this period before refrigeration, and then they would butcher it later when they needed it. Probably not, because it'd be very expensive, I've learned, and that only the wealthy would probably travel with animals to eat on the way. But I have also verified that almost every man at the time would have the skills of at least rudimentary butchering. So it would have been possible to take an animal like that, and they may have, because they had a large group. But most likely they were just getting provisions for the day. And in this panel, Jesus says, "I have meat to eat that ye know not of." And of course, just as he was talking to the woman about the water, he wasn't talking about water. He was talking about the Holy Spirit. And this meat that he's talking about, it's not actually meat. But the disciples, they don't understand what he's talking about. And they say, as someone brought him food, they think perhaps he's eaten while they were away. And Jesus says, well, Jesus doesn't say, but the people of Sychar come out to Jesus, and many believe on him. So the comic has left the disciples in their confusion about why Jesus is not hungry. But he's telling them that the strength to get through his mission now comes directly from his Father God. And in this panel, they beg Jesus to stay with them. That's the Samaritans. They beg him to stay. Many more believe when they hear him preach. So those that come to him, they believe. All they need to do is see and hear him, and they believe. And they beg him to stay so they can bring more to him to believe. And Gunn says, if we had met Jesus today, would we have trusted him as the Messiah? That is the question, Gunn. And that's the purpose of the stories. To bring the time when Jesus lived into your life today so that you can question, would I have been a disciple? Would I have believed? Would I have seen that he was the Savior? Would I have denied him later? I mean, all the disciples did things like this, right? So, and the disciples who later became apostles, they understood this. And all the people they talked to afterwards, they never saw Jesus, and yet they too believed. So there's a strong statement about faith that's coming through the book of John. And Terry at Elvis History says this is very interesting and enjoyable. Thank you so much, Terry. And Gunn says, in what way could Jesus have proved he was the Messiah? Well, he performed miracles. But I think most of the proof came through the witnessing of others. Like these people that we see in the panel. They heard him. They didn't see a miracle. They heard him, and they saw him, and they met him, and they believed, and they had faith. So it's not so much what he does, it's the faith that is transmitted through those that believe. And that's what brings others to believe that he is the Messiah. Now, those first ones, they make a tremendous leap of faith. A leap most others could not make. But then they bring others with them. Like what Elvis is doing. He's already made his leap of faith. He made it when he was a child. And he's made it again when Gladys passed away. Because without that faith, he is not going to ever see Gladys again. And he cannot abandon his mother. This is the only path, the only way. But no one else is walking it with him. None of the people around him, including the woman he marries, are walking this path. And in his quest, he finds that he can show people the path in a different manner. And that some of them begin to listen. Not many. Not the ones that are right around him. That has to be incredibly disappointing for him. But some of them. And Gunn says, what would Jesus have had to do to prove it that he was the Messiah to Gunn herself? That is a very deep question, Gunn. Because she also says that she doesn't know. And I think that's a question that haunts everyone who has faith and believes. Would you have believed? What sign would you have required? Or could you have done it with no sign? Many of these people believed with no sign. But that's where we're going to end it today. And we're going to finish our review of chapter 4 in the next episode. And then we're going to move on to chapter 5 of the book of John as we continue to walk with Elvis through the texts that meant something special to him and that he tried to share with others and that so very few people took the time to understand. But there's a few more of us that have. And for now, I'm going to leave you all with a song about walking through these texts with Elvis. And this is the journey that Elvis took as he read these books. And it's called Word on Fire. Until I see you all again at Terry's birthday party today, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 8 p.m. London time. You all keep on taking care of business.